The people of Myanmar have been subjected to military rule once more for almost 2 years. Myanmar's humanitarian and security conditions continue to deteriorate. Despite hostilities and a crippling economic crisis, people continue to suffer. Even though various ethnic armed organizations, EAOs, and People's Defense Forces, PDFs, are actively opposing the regime, the junta appears content and determined to secure its position through a planned national election in 2023. Can this election be impartial and free? The unanswered burning question. Let's begin by discussing the parachute policy. Professional and competent administrators are forced to work under active or retired military personnel as a result of a policy in which high-ranking military officers are brought in to oversee ministries and agencies. In the same way that military coups are common in Myanmar, the transfer of army personnel to key administrative positions is also common. Following his coup in 1962, the late dictator General Ne Win instituted the policy for the first time. It was viewed as one of the worst aspects of his decades-long rule, Irrawaddy, that he set out to embed the military in every sector of the government, from low-ranking ministerial bureaucrats all the way up to the presidency. The current head of the junta is reviving the efforts made by his predecessors to militarize the civil service. Currently, military officers are in charge of half of the 30 ministries in the cabinet of the military regime. In addition, many military officers have left ministries because of the permanent secretary position. The Union Civil Service Board, UCSB, which has 9 officers led by a colonel and is in charge of recruiting and promoting civil servants, has been taken over by the military. The Union Election Commission, or UEC, is currently led by a former major general, and its members are all former military personnel. In fact, the junta is now directly in charge of all government administrative bodies. In addition to this election engineering setup, the junta is making every effort to hold the election in 2023. On December 25, retired military officers and high-ranking current regime officials gathered in Yangon for a reunion. Among the attendees were senior military officers from the Defense Services Academy, DSA, S15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th intakes, USDP party chairman and former Brigadier General Kin Yi, 17th intake, and ministers from the Ministry of Foreign, International Cooperation, and Rural Development. Although he was not present in person, the chief of the junta, 19th intake, sent messages and presented gifts. The annual event took on a new meaning when the seniority of the attendees and the regime's intention to hold a general election in 2023 were taken into consideration. The junta granted the release of nearly 6,000 inmates on November 17 and 7,012 inmates on January 4, 2023, in order to establish a trustworthy situation for the upcoming election. The Chief Minister of Irrawaddy region and most of his cabinet members have recently been released by the junta. It is simpler for the regime to hold an election in Irrawaddy region because resistance forces are less active there. As a result, the release aims to set the stage for the election. Concerning SUUKYI's NLD, the junta has appointed 2 members of the NLD to negotiate for the upcoming election of the jailed leader SUUKYI. Da Sandar Min, a former lawmaker for the NLD in the Yangon region, and U Tol Win, the deputy chairperson of the NLD in the Irrawaddy region, met with SUUKYI last month at the Naypyidaw prison. Junta has sentenced SUUKYI to 7 additional years in prison as a result of her rejection of the proposal. More than 200 former NLD lawmakers, according to reports, accepted political pensions from the regime, which is a sum of money given to members of parliament when their terms end. SUUKYI rejected it. According to the report, nearly 10 former NLD members intend to run for the junta in the 2023 election. In the case of EAOs, the junta successfully initiated a peace agreement with the Arakan army, putting an end to the severe fighting that had occurred in Rakhine over the past few months. Not only that, but the military has extended the ceasefire agreement with 10 EAOs until the end of 2023, according to the junta's Office of Commander-in-Chief of Defense Services. The junta has intensified armed operations to neutralize resistance forces in the former Bamar-dominated regions, Sagaing, Magway, and Mandalay, the epicenter and hotbeds of the new resistance movement. The junta is attempting to stabilize the nation diplomatically with China's assistance. This week, China's special envoy to Myanmar held separate meetings in China's Yunnan province with representatives of 7 ethnic armed organizations, EAOs. The meetings made it clear that China wants peace and not conflict. Russia, India, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam have all expressed the same sentiment on multiple occasions. Democracy is essential for establishing people's rule on the throne, and elections are an essential component of a democratic system. However, given the junta's election engineering and control over governmental institutions, it is unlikely that an election will be free, fair, and credible. Instead, it might make the current crisis and pressing issues like the Rohingya repatriation even worse.